Are you tired of spending your time and money chasing strategy after strategy only to discover what worked 10, 5, or even 2 years ago is not working now? Things shift fast in the online space, and if you're not keeping up, you're getting left behind. It's time for something different. Welcome to the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast, where every single episode will be jam-packed with proven, profitable strategies, behind-the-scenes secrets, and what's working now resources from industry experts and global influencers to help you scale your business, shorten your learning curve, and stand out in a crowded, noisy marketplace. And now, your host, award-winning marketing and media strategist, and international speaker, Patty Farmer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. I'm your host, Patty Farmer, and I'm really looking forward to sharing today's industry expert with you. And I love who we have on the show today, and you are going to love her too. And all of you know that I come from a networking background. It's how I have built my business. But today, I'm going to bring on somebody who literally, this is her business. Not how she built her business, but is her business. So get your pen and paper out because you are going to really get some writer-downers, as I like to say. So let me tell you a little bit about her. So Ashley Owens is the first and only networking concierge that puts you in the right situation or gets you out of the wrong one. As a networking concierge, Ashley works as a strategic partner, attending events with professionals as an extension and champion of them at local events and also at conferences. She has taken over 700 introduction phone calls with business professionals looking to grow their network, has given close to 1,000 introductions, and has over 185 referral partners. So that's pretty impressive right there. So let's get to it. Ashley, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Hello, Patty. Thank you for having me. This is wonderful. I'm such a fan.
Thanks so much. I love it because I have to tell you, you are the only person I have ever met so far who literally thinks about networking like me, although in a little different way. Of course, we're all our own person, but literally has done as many calls and, introductions because I think it is just so amazing. But I think people nowadays, all they think about are, I want to try to get a referral. And I personally think a powerful introduction is like the gift that keeps on giving. Right. And I will take a powerful introduction that is done right over a possible referral any day of the week.
Very much so. It's so important to have those and also to be cognizant of what kinds of referrals or introductions to give. And, there's a woman that I know, her name is Bryn Tillman. She's a friend of mine. She brought up a really great statement that, the difference between a referral and an introduction is that a referral, you're putting your reputation on the line. And with an introduction is just an introduction. So it's people that may be like-minded, maybe they've got similarities, but referral is you have your reputation's on the line, and then with an introduction, it's an introduction.
Although I have to tell you, now I can't speak for anybody else, but I won't give an introduction either. If somebody says to me, Patty, would you introduce me to this, that, or that? Or somebody says, Patty, I'd like to be introduced to a CPA or this and that. And I know them, they're in my network. I'll do that for sure. And I call that an introduction. But a powerful introduction for me is when I do an introduction for you. And I like to tell people why they should connect, because otherwise, we've all been introduced to somebody and we thought to ourselves, why they introduce them to me? Or the introduction, you're like, where'd they get that from, right?
Right.
I mean, you're like, I think it's super powerful when you get it right. And that's why all of my strategic partners or power partners or whatever somebody's word for that is, I have them all give me 1, 2, or 3 introductions depending upon how many avatars they have. And I will always put my personal, endorsement in there for sure. But I think getting introduced the way you need to be introduced is wonderful. And I think a lot of that stems from being a speaker, right? And it's really like, it sets the stage for you right from the beginning if the introduction is done right. So what is a few things that you think really need to be added to an introduction to elevate it to be more than just, hey, I think you guys need to know each other. I can't wait to hear what happens.
The best practices for an introduction, kind of for me, layout, and like you said, everyone is networking is such a personal activity. It's not a one size fits all. So the best part about networking is that you can cherry pick from best practices to kind of hone your own plan and hone your own strategy. On the flip side of making a good introduction, sometimes I know two people so well that just haven't met each other. And I've gotten to the point where they know my personality so well. I just sent this email out last night at like 11 o'clock at night. My girlfriend, Graceful, and my other girlfriend, Bridget Battles, their personalities would match so well, and I know they could collaborate in so many different areas, and they're such powerhouse women that I just CC'd them both on an email and wrote in the subject line, "Trust me, bitches, I love you." I'm not saying that's appropriate, however, I've known them so long. Don't do that the first time around. But the best way for you to make an introduction is the following. I kind of piece it out in a couple different ways. You want to CC them both in the email, number one. You don't ever want to say, oh, just, use my name for the introduction. That's a cheap and not very intentional way of helping that person out when they're asking for the intro. In the subject line, I personally put intros, ! Because I'm a fairy, apparently, and love exclamation points. And then their name with like the brackets and then the other person's name. So you can kind of also search for that in your subjects if you need to keep track of who you connected with or who you connected people to. And then in the line, I always send the message to the person that I said that I was going to make the introduction to. So for example, it's always, hey, how are you? How are things going? Let's say, hey, Patty, I want to make an intro. I hope everything's okay, especially with the pandemic. You always want to add in a little personal line before you even start the rest of the conversation or the rest of the intro. So something personal that you remember or something personal just to say, nice to see you, nice to chat with you again. I would love to make a personal introduction to, let's say, my girlfriend, Graceful. She does X, Y, and Z. I think there's a lot of collaboration opportunities and synergies between your companies, and I really hope you can connect. I put her LinkedIn link directly underneath that paragraph. And then I also address the other person in the email to say, hey, Gracie, this is Patty. Here's why I think you guys should connect. And then also her LinkedIn as well. So that way they can check each other out before they get on the call. It's always, I hope you two can connect at the very end and then, leave it at that. I typically, because I give about 3 introductions per person per day, and I typically take, 7 to 8 calls a day, introduction calls. I typically don't follow up on the introduction, but the next time I see that person, like, hey, how'd it go? And if they know me, they'll always let me know, like, hey, this was a great connection. Or I'll see them on each other's shows, and then they become best friends. And then I'm like, good, did my job. But that would be the best way to do it, is always put in something personal. Sometimes personalities are going to mesh well before what they actually do, because you know that they're very collaborative people. So you want to break it down to those 3 areas. It's the personal sentence, a little bit about their companies, what they specialize in, and then why you think they should connect. I think that there might be synergies between your companies, and then vice versa. That helps.
I love that. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm interested to know why. I agree with you. I'll say that. But why do you choose to give a LinkedIn link rather than, I know for me, I love the LinkedIn link, but I tend to, because I ask people all the time where they hang out at on social media, I would use whatever one I knew that was where they hung out. But I really do love LinkedIn. So do you have a personal reason why you use a LinkedIn link versus another social media platform?
Correct. LinkedIn to me is where I live. I live on LinkedIn. Another social media platform, if their platform is typically all on Facebook, it's usually somebody who is not necessarily in that realm of introductions that I give. Again, Facebook and Instagram are a little bit, to me, not as professional as a LinkedIn profile would be. So it covers their backgrounds, their kudos, their activity, their interests specifically around thought leadership, and I find that LinkedIn is the most professional profile to use. And it's easy for me to grab, and then they can take a look at their picture, see who else they're connected with. It also starts the conversation for them both to do a little research on their background, to do a deeper dive as the connection is being made.
I love that. Okay, so you said that you do about 7 to 8 introduction calls a day. So
Correct.
obviously we all have to work too. What is for you, and I know it varies, right? But what for you, an introduction call, what's the time length that you find really works for that, for what you need to know what you need to know to move it to the next step?
So I break down my introduction calls and to tell me all about you, tell me how you got started. I'm a naturally curious person, so I really get to know about, their interests first, because of the people that I have in my brain and in my Excel file in my own head of introductions to make. It's never just about business, it's about who could collaborate the best with. So the way that my intro calls typically happen is I go into tell me more about you. When somebody picks up the phone to call you, what problem are they having? And, who are you looking to hire somebody right now? Like, what's the biggest challenge in your business? And most of the time I end up connecting people that have either had a similar challenge where they can talk to each other and kind of work with each other in that way, or somebody who is going to better them in an area that I'm unfamiliar with. So for example, I'm looking at my own intro calls. These are all, you can't see this because it's a podcast, but I'm showing this to Patty. It's all of my intro calls that I need to make throughout the week. And I just enjoy getting somebody connected in a way that's beneficial. Whether I know it's going to happen or not, I think it's important to recognize that, like for example, there's this woman, her name is Stacy. She is a writer and she's currently in between jobs and she's a freelancer as well. Very wonderful woman, has an amazing background, amazing experience, is currently in transition. I know a wonderful website developer that is always looking for a copywriter because I also work with him with another client. I know another website developer that works specifically in SEO that's a personal friend of mine. And then I know a gentleman who runs a magazine that I've given him writers before. So again, these are all great additions to the first two to say hey, this is a good vendor opportunity. And then there might be a job opportunity or a freelance opportunity with the guy that runs the magazine. So I try to connect them, and I know all of these people that I'm making the introductions to very well. So they don't ever feel like I need to give them a huge deep dive or description about why they're connecting. I always let them know very quickly of there might be good opportunities, but I know these guys so well, and I know my power partners so well that they've learned to trust me, and I made it my mission for them to just, Ashley's told us to meet. It hasn't failed me before, so they'll always pick up the phone. That kind of engagement that I have with these people, I've worked very, very hard to build, because you're building the know, like, and trust factor. So it ends up making that my time to make these introductions aren't so completely condensed into one email. It ends up being a quick kind of turnaround and everybody gets connected.
I think that's really important when you're making introductions. For me, when I make powerful introduction, I do actually follow up, because I really want to know, because if that's somebody that I'm going to continue to introduce, I just want to make sure that it went really well.
Yep.
And that makes me feel really good. I kind of have I don't want to say a ranking system, but I actually do kind of have a ranking system of how I introduce. And I think it is really important. And again, it's really how we build our business, right? Because the power of a good introduction. So now you have a first introduction call you have with somebody, right? So if somebody introduces you, or you're reaching out to somebody for the first time, once you have that call, do you have a set of, I don't want to say rules, but I always say rules of engagement, right? That you use, what's your next step? Take us through your process.
Oh, so, because I network for a living, it absolutely can get overwhelming. And so I found that in my own best practices, I was slacking on the follow-up for a while, because it wasn't that I didn't want to follow up, it was because I was promising people so much, which is just the nature of how I do things, that I was starting to slip on some of the things that I said I was going to do. What I've done in the past is I have the biggest component of what I do is I give a lot of value, meaning resources, tools, tangible activities, tangible things that people can facilitate. So my follow-up process was always hey, thank you so much for chatting with me last week. How did those introductions go? Now it's more of, after they get on a call with me, I have a system in place or emails in place that aren't campaigny. They're not very sales driven. It's more of just, I don't ever want to forget giving them these resources, and not just at one time. So I have a email system that goes out directly from my emails of what I would have sent them anyway, but just so I don't forget and they're not bombarded with one email with a bunch of stuff in it. So for example, I have, as soon as I have a conversation with them, they get added to an email chain that is the next day is like, thank you so much. Like, by the way, here's a great resource that I just put together, which is helpful tools and resources on my website, which is all the links of tools that would be very helpful. Then the first one is the downloadable. So it's a full list of networking tactical tips that are based off of industry. So I give that to somebody that I've had the pleasure of speaking with, the pleasure and the privilege of speaking with. Then at like 3 days later, I ask them, hey, do you have any updates on like what you would like to see? Meaning like, what did you think of it? I'm curious to see if I could add anything to it. So I'm asking for their opinion because I had the pleasure to talk to them. I'd like to know about it. Then after that, I give them the business tools and resources page, I think 2 days later. And then the third day is I actually invite them to Connect to Success, which is a show I have on RBN TV. So now, because of everything that's been going on in the world, I can do a lot more virtual stuff. So if I'm talking to somebody from Australia, I just talked to somebody from Ireland, they're coming on the show, and I've now expanded and didn't forget to give them that invitation. And then the last is, hey, I have this champion program. Would you mind sharing it? Let me know your opinion on it because it's still in the beta testing. So I end up following up with somebody a total of 5 times of giving as many resources, providing as much value as I can, and then asking their opinion on a few different programs that I'm running because I'm curious to see if I can make it better. So not once am I selling anything in any of those follow-ups, but it also keeps me top of mind, reminds me that I'm not forgetting to follow up with those people with these resources, and it keeps it separated so they don't feel like they're getting bombarded with so many things because I have a lot.
And I think that's really a great way to nurture business relationships. I know that for me, when I am thinking about that, I always like to say to people, it's really, really great when you have something that's a downloadable and people opt into it. But people can opt out just as easy as they can opt in. And it's really all about what's your stick strategy and how are you going to get them to stick around. And that is all about having a nurture sequence, right? Like, what are you doing to nurture them? And I think the other thing is always making sure that the information that you're sharing is relevant. I know for me, twice a year, I actually go through my email list because everything is segmented, and I send everybody an email that says, just want to make sure that I honor you by sending you information that is relevant to what you're interested in. Please, check below, which things you're interested in. And then they do it. And when they do, it actually segments my list and it moves them into a list of that information. So they're only getting sent information that they like. And it's actually done automatically for me. And I think that really has really worked. So I love that. So I always love hearing, tactical tips and things that other people have. It's really all about finding other resources of people, right, who do things just a little bit differently and adding that to, your repertoire, so to speak. Now, I have to say, one of the things when I was introducing you, I really loved when you said put you in the right situation or get you out of the wrong one. I love that. Because I know that, there's always those times that we get stuck, right? So kind of let's talk a little bit about that. What do you mean when you say get you out of the wrong?
So in the networking world, as you and I both know, is that there are givers and there are takers. And whether it's taking up a ton of your time, somebody who wants to talk just about themselves or trying to sell you something, it just becomes a situation where you have to navigate and troubleshoot different personalities and manage through those personalities. So it ends up being, people buy from people and business is just people. So a lot of the times you kind of have to play this, not even a psychological pull, but you have to understand body language and you have to be able to pivot the conversation it's an art and it's a finesse. If you do it as much as Patty and I do it, you become it's like a muscle, because in the beginning, we definitely put our foot in our mouth and we realized like how to be able to get out of that by troubleshooting, but nobody ever actually taught us that. I had a client reach out to me the other day and he goes, hey, I'm taking all these phone calls and I don't know how to get off the phone with somebody who clearly is a taker, who is taking up 45 minutes of my time just talking about themselves. And I recognize that I have never taught that skill because early on, I cultivated it based off of screwing up a bunch of times and being stuck in those conversations for 45 minutes and then recognizing ways to pivot based off of, the conversation that we're having. So it was a very nice eye-opening experience of like, nobody's been taught this, but because of the nature of what I do, I was able to learn it without even realizing it was a skill. I just felt like it was the right thing to do. So to getting yourself out of the wrong one, I do have a presentation, and there's a slide specifically around, especially for on-site activities. So we can do on-site and online if that's okay. Like on-site and then on the call.
I think it is really important because I know that when you're on in-person events, a lot of times people who are not so, for lack of a better term, natural at networking, or maybe it comes a little harder to them, or they're introverted, whatever the case may be, and they tend to want to cluster with people that they know, right? For me, I feel like if I already know you, the only reason we need to be together when I go to an event is for you to tell me what I should listen for, so that while we're at that event, I can be bringing people over and introducing them to you. Exactly. Other than that, like the reason that I'm there is to meet new people, right? And to serve my network when I'm finding people that I know that I could do introductions for other people that I know that are looking for them. Yep. And so I think it is really interesting. And then even virtually, to be totally honest, virtually I have been on, Zoom calls and stuff, and clearly we're 10 minutes over where we should have wrapped it up. And you have to get really good out of knowing exactly how to do that. I feel like that's kind of my superpower. But I just think it is really important to be able to do it and still be of service, right? Because I truly believe that we lead with contribution and compensation will follow, but you still serve, right? It's always about being of service. And so I find that it is interesting sometimes when you get in those situations where people just don't want to let go.
Very much so. And so I found that to be, especially for on-site activities, that became a question. And then over the phone, it's a little bit different because there's no movement. So if you'd like, I can go through 11 graceful ways to end the conversation in person that work 100% of the time. This is stuff that I teach when we weren't during the pandemic, but the 11 came from me testing out different theories and trying them out for a couple of weeks to see what actually worked. So if I could be so bold and go through them. So the first one is say thank you and goodbye. Obviously, these are normal things to do. The second one is to phone home. If you've got kids, use them. Use them. These. You've got little spawns, use them. Some kid has explosive diarrhea, you have to go. Okay, the first two are funny, but the few others are, ask who else you should meet. So to your point, at a networking event, now that we both know what we do, is there anybody here that that you think I should meet? That starts the conversation for them to look around, builds more movement in the space, and kind of pivots the conversation to a more of an intentional direction. Then they introduce the person to someone else that you know. Again, very simple. That way you can kind of not pass them off, but just say, hey, this person spent 45 minutes with me. In your head, at least now you have an idea of how to explain who they are to somebody else, and then kind of help facilitate those introductions. Ask directions to the restroom if you really have to get out of it, because sometimes guys are creepy, so try to get to the restroom. Offer to deliver a drink or go to the buffet. The reason why, again, you're building up movement, you can kind of start, digressing in your conversation. Ask if you'll meet the person at a future event. This is a really good one because this also gets them open and talking about things that would be relevant to you. So, for example, what other groups are you a part of? What other events, are good that you think I should take a look into? And that way can open that conversation up to a more meaningful and valuable experience. Again, ask for the other person's card, give the other person your card, ask to connect on social media, whether it's LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a great tool that you can use to find my friends, and then plan to get together. Sometimes these conversations may be 45 minutes, but it could be like Patty and I are talking. It could be a great conversation that lasts so long because you don't want to give it up, but you know that you also have to work the room and make the most of your time there. So think of planning your work and working your plan. If you have a plan in place to meet with that person, put it on the calendar on your phone and go from there. So there's kind of two different ways of getting somebody, just to kind of pivot and have the conversation go into a different direction if the person's talking your ear off. And sometimes the conversation's great and you just want to talk all day long, but you know you both need to shift. So in both those areas, these 11 ways work pretty well.
And I think it's really important too, because when you're at an event, the event's 2 hours long and you go in and, you have a plan, you know what you're going to do. So even if you do meet somebody that is absolutely wonderful, you still need to meet other people. And one of my favorite ways is, especially now that we're doing so much virtual, is if I still want to know them, I want to learn more, I find that inviting them to another thing, like I invite them to another event or a Zoom thing that, some type of virtual thing. And I'll say, I'd love to send you, an invitation, and that's when I get their business card. And then, I follow up. They see I kept my word. I did what I said. Yeah. I find that those are really, really good pivots for me. So I have a question, Ashley. What do you think is a good amount of time to get to an event? So like for me, I kind of live by the 30-minute rule. Like, if there's going to be an event there, I'm there 30 minutes before, because I feel like the most important people that I'm going to meet are going to be the people that are there before the event starts. No matter what type of networking event it is, I mean, the person who is registering the people, that person is like a great person, meeting the host. And not only that, but then I kind of don't want to get stuck in the line of registering and all that kind of stuff. I'm out of that so that I can actually be paying attention to what's going on. But what about you?
Exactly. I train my clients to arrive 20 minutes early and see if you can help the coordinator. Whether it's setting up, whether it's, hey, I'd like to learn more about the organization, chat with the coordinator, because they're your own networking concierge. They know everybody that's showing up. Maybe see if you can help register, especially for newbies. A lot of these coordinators are volunteer and they may need help. Maybe reach out to them about a week in advance and say, hey, I'm looking to build up my network. Would you help register? You register people in, you get to know who's coming in the door. And it's actually a trick I used to do when I was a personal assistant. I worked for 2 celebrities in New York, so my background was a little bit more eclectic than most. So if somebody was rude to me that needed to get to my client, they weren't getting through. So think of you as your own client. If somebody's rude to you at registration, or they're chatting you up because, it's a nice experience, then you know who you want to meet when you walk in after you register people in. So it's kind of like it's a nice way to kind of understand like who the person really is, because sometimes, as you know, people can be sometimes rude to service workers, to anybody who's working the room. Most of them in networking organizations aren't. They're very, very kind, and everyone is there to do the same thing, which is to network effectively. But it's nice to see, who's their kind of true colors. It's a trick I used to do in the very beginning. I would go and ask, especially organizations I was looking to join, like, hey, do you guys need help? I'd be happy to volunteer, and you get there an hour early, chat it up with the coordinator. She'd be happy, probably happy. She or he might be happy to make introductions for you while you're there and be appreciative of the help. So that's, my usual arrival time is about 20 to 30 minutes before. Check out the place, kind of get my bearings, especially if I'm driving a further, a long way away, or if I'm commuting. I always use the restroom beforehand. I just, make sure that I'm kind of getting in the zone of a long night, which could, typically be. Some days I don't want to network, and I network for a living. Sometimes it's a lot. So, you really want to be very cognizant of your own energy level, especially for my introverts out there. If you're going to events or if you're talking to people one-on-one, I know how much of an energy suck that is. So go in there with intention and use these little tricks to kind of make the best use of your time.
So if somebody really wasn't networking, so they had a business and they're like, I really don't network, or maybe they are, corporate, now they're transitioning to being a consultant and they need to start networking because they probably network different internally in that corporation, but like now they're out on their own. What would your advice be?
So this is exactly what I went through. I was working at eBay and SCI Investments, and I never had network externally, which stunted my professional growth. Those companies had a lot of turnover. So, it was good. It was a good experience to kind of kick myself in the butt to start building up a network outside of my current position. My advice would be is that you want to fail hard and fail fast and move on. Right now with networking, you don't know your style yet. And your style comes from your personality, what motivates you to make decisions and get things done, which in turn builds up networking activity that fits for your own, needs of networking. So first I would go and I would bring, especially if you're very, very new to this, bring somebody with you to an event. Start joining webinars, especially now that we've got virtual options. Start joining webinars that could potentially help grow your skill sets rather than just like a random, networking event. If you can, start jumping on like mastermind groups, local mastermind groups. And these are questions you're going to have to ask people as you go on, and see if there's a way to learn more about how to present yourself at a virtual roundtable, or how to present yourself at an event. For me, it was like ripping a Band-Aid off. So I kind of had to, I jumped in with both feet, not recognizing the best practices and then teaching myself after. If you're going in with a plan, I highly suggest you do that first. But also recognize that like networking is a personal activity. It's also a marketing activity. It's not a sales one. So market yourself. It's a personal branding activity that allows you to build your own network based off of who you are as a person. You've got to take the pressure off of selling yourself. You have to, because nobody gives a damn about what you do. Nobody gives a damn about what I do. No one cares about Patty. No one cares. They care how you made them feel. Because at the very baseline of networking, it is a human behavior and a human reaction and a human component. So take the pressure off of doing anything that you heard that's stereotypical when it comes to networking, and build a relationship with somebody that you would typically do at a bar if you're going out with friends, or if you're in a line and you're trying to make the cashier's day. Networking is an activity that is so important in life and you've got plenty of opportunities to do that outside of organized events.
I love that. Do you have a favorite book that you would recommend to every business owner read?
Yes, Entrepreneur You is a great book. I love it because it kind of easily put you into a mindset of how to think strategically. I haven't finished it yet. I'm towards the end, but it's an audiobook as well. My friend recommended it to me, and it kind of gave me an idea of what an entrepreneur was, because I had no business starting a business when I first started. I had no business starting a business. I didn't have a business degree. I had a mass communications degree, but I knew how to work very, very hard. And I knew how to learn quick and on my own pace. So when you're building a business, it's important to start asking those questions of like, what books do you think I should read? What audiobooks do you think I should listen to? But yeah, that would be my suggestion, Entrepreneur You.
I love that. So Ashley, how can my audience connect with you?
Places. I'm everywhere. LinkedIn. People can reach out to me at ashley@ashley.assist.com. ashley.assist.com. I'm on every social media platform. So Ashley Assist, all set in stone. And my phone number, if I forget, because it's a Google number, I'll give that later, but ashley.assist.com is right there.
Perfect. And you came bearing gifts, and I love that. So tell everyone a little bit about your gift. You talked about it a little bit earlier in the show, but tell us about it.
Yeah, sure. The gift it's a curated networking tips list based off of industry. So on a show I have called Connect to Success, I've interviewed people over the past 2 years about their networking tactical tips. And what I've done from that is I gathered all of those main tips and filed them under each industry. So that way, if you are, let's say, in financial services, or you're working in cloud services, or you're real estate, whatever it may be, it's specific to your industry, because I could talk to you till I'm blue in the face, but if you're going to be able to react and to really lean into a more intentional way of networking, looking at those tips based off of the industry professionals that do it very well is going to be more applicable to you and your business. So though that's a free downloadable that I've curated over the past 2 years. So that's available right on my site.
Awesome. And we will have that link in our show notes. So make sure you just click below and grab that. So that's great. So now we're at the portion of the show I love to call #OpenMic. It's my version of social karaoke. And this is where I turn the mic over to my guests and ask them to share their number one marketing, media, and money strategy. So this is the name of our show. It's what we like to say. We are going to show you what's working now, not 5 years ago or 2 years ago, but what's working now. So Ashley, share with us your number one marketing, media, or money strategy.
Everyone's an idiot. Just kidding. The number one marketing media strategy that I love, that I really try to hone in with people, is that try to take your stuff above and beyond. Try to take the way that you interact with people above and beyond and following up. But when you follow up, you want to do it with intention. And that intention revolves around, taking the next step for that follow-up. So for example, when right now things are a little crazy in the world, but ending your messages like, let me know if you'd like to chat, or how can I help you? What you're really saying, like, remove that from your vernacular. Yes, it's a very common phrase to use, but you're kind of leaving it up in the air for that person to tell you how you can help them. So what you're really saying with that is that I didn't take the time to think through what I can do for you, nor what you can do for me. So when you follow up with ways of how you actually can help them by listening to what they're asking for. So I'm going to repeat that. Let me know if I'd like to chat. Let me know if you'd like to chat, or how can I help you? What you're really saying is, I didn't take the time to think through what I can do for you, nor what you can do for me. So when you follow with intention and with purpose, and with always, always, always providing value.
I absolutely love that. But that led me to another question that I want to ask. Give us an example of a better way than that. Like, give us an example of somebody who did that right.
Yeah, so you can reference a bit of the conversation that you've had to say, hey, I heard that, right? So for example, I spoke with a gentleman who's a lawyer who just started his own practice. And within it, I could hear his frustration of organization and not necessarily having the right tools to network effectively. And so he likes learning rather than just having somebody do it for him. But a lot of organization aspects, he didn't have the time to research people to help him with that. So instead of saying like, hey, thank you so much for your chat today, where do you think I can help you? It was more of, hey, I recognize that you have this organizational issue. I've got a secret weapon who is a virtual assistant. Would this introduction be beneficial for you? And it's taking the context clues from the conversation you had by the questions you ask, so that way you can make a better and more intentional introduction. So come into the conversation hot, meaning like you've got some resources that you'd like to share, or you've got some value that you'd like to provide, and the rest will follow. But you want to not just leave it open-ended like, hey, how can I help you? It's more of, who is a good introduction for you? And then that way it's a more intentional give back.
And I think that a lot of that comes from doing your due diligence before you even got on the phone in the first place.
It can be, or it could be the questions that you ask. Because
it's always about the questions that we ask. Ask better questions, you get better answers. But I also find that for me, I have this phrase that I always like to say, that when I'm talking to someone or I'm listening to somebody, I always like to listen between the lines. Because if I listen between the lines, that's when I know that when I'm wrapping it up, that I know that what I am going to say at the end sets the tone for where we go from there. And I think it's really important. So I absolutely love that you touched on that. Thank you so much for giving us an example. And Ashley, thank you so much for being here with me today. This was fabulous. I really appreciate it. I know that my audience did too. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to the audience, thank you for joining us on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. Make sure you check out our sister publication, the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine. You can grab your free lifetime subscription at marketingmediamoney.com. Listen, it's Friday. I love that it's Friday. Make it a fabulous day, a fabulous weekend. And remember, if your day isn't fabulous, you have the power to change it.
Thank you for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. To shorten your learning curve even more, make sure to grab your free copy of the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine at www.marketingmediamoney.com. I promise your business will thank you.